Hi, I'm Tanya Abraham and I'm the author of the book Eating with History, Ancient Trade Influence Cuisines of Kerala. And today here we are going to be having an event during the Kochi Art Week, which is held by the Kochi Binnale Foundation. It's a talk on the culture and heritage of the specific cuisines that came from the spice trade in Kerala. It will be followed by a little demonstration to deconstruct a particular food item called Aappam to show how influences came together to create specific kind of cuisines. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. I love food like most people, and my grandmother was a fantastic cook, just like most grandmothers. And growing up in Fort Cochin, I realized that food cannot be contained within the four walls of a home. It really is community food. And Fort Cochin and Matangeri area have so many communities, and there were things which were brought in for Christmas or for some other festival at home. And my grandmother used to have this huge number of people dropping in every day because they were involved in politics and things like that. So as a child, I used to watch her. I used to watch all the things that she used to cook, and it kind of sparked an interest in me where all this was coming from. And that's why I said bring your food memories, because food memories are very important and our identities are inextricably linked to food. It might be very unconscious, but it's a fact. And we might not realize it, but the moment we start deciphering the whole thing, we realize that we cannot be separated from the food we've grown up with, or the community that we grew up with, and the food customs and traditions in that community, right? So then of course, through my course of my career, my life as a mother, and all of that, I started paying more attention to these details on how identities evolved. And it was very intriguing for me that because both my parents, they come from two different Catholic communities. My father is a Latin Catholic and my mother is a Syrian Catholic. So that was quite, there was a difference I saw growing up, both in culture and also in terms of food. But the way the food was cooked, even though the recipes were the same, the technique changed, or one little ingredient made the dish very different from the other. So these were things I used to watch. So in this book, what I did was I researched on the cuisines that evolved in Kerala because of the ancient spice trade, and specifically the ancient spice trade. So all the communities are not covered. It's only the communities which have been influenced by the spice trade and the coming of certain foreign influences into Kerala. So there are 6 specific communities, 3 of which fall under Christianity, and the other 2 are Muslim based, and of course we have the Jews. And why I'm talking about religion is one main reason why these cuisines remain unscathed in Kerala is because there was so much of identity associated with religion. And religion being such a very, it's a part of who we are as Indians, whichever religious background we come from in some form or the other, even if you're not practicing, that particular religion, there is some sort of an identity that is linked to it. And this particular aspect kept the food recipes going, generation after generation after generation. And that is what makes Kerala unique, as many parts of India. So the 6 communities I have covered here, one is the Maplas, which were influenced by the Arabs, the Jews, both the Malabari and the Pardesi, the Catholics, Syrian Catholics, and Christians, because I put them under one category, and I'll tell you the reasons why later, Latin Catholics and the Anglo-Indians. So we have all these communities. It took me 3 years to make this tiny book. Because there's no research done on this aspect before in Kerala, and it was really difficult to find facts which are authentic, and it's not something that somebody was saying, and so you have to keep cross-checking to see whether the facts hold water. So I started by visiting ancient, old, whatever families. I listened to their stories. I began to see whether there are anything which is common between families, what connects the dots, who makes the food, are the recipes passed down from mother to daughter, or is it a communal passing down of recipes? So these are very important aspects in understanding how a community functions. So when we go back to history and we go back to the time of food arriving in Kerala, just like all other parts of India, it was an agricultural community, and then it moved to people largely being vegetarians. The idea of consuming meat came in much later. A lot of us are hardcore meat eaters today probably, but it came in much later because of the coming of foreign influence largely. So the spice trade goes back to before Christ, and the first arrival of the first community in Kerala were the Jews. The Jews arrived and settled in Kerala somewhere around 3rd BC, largely because of the destruction of the second temple. Of course, they came in here earlier because of the spice route and the trade, but as a community, the Malabari Jews from the Middle East, they came in around that time, and they found a home in Kodungalur, or Muziris, the famed Muziris area. And once the Jews settled there, they began to adopt whatever was possible. You have to remember that they have left their country, they have probably not taken anything with them. They probably carried memories, and part of which would be food memories. So there was the need to always innovate and figure out how to sustain themselves in a new country, in a new environment with new kinds of ingredients. The same thing in terms of the Arabs. So the Arabs did not move from the Middle East as a community like the Jews, but Islam came via the ships, when the ships plied their way through the waters along with the southwest monsoons, and they docked at Muziris, and later in Kochi, Fort Kochi. The whole idea was for them to be here a couple of months, and then they would go back. When the monsoons changed, when the winds changed, they would go back to the Middle East. So that period of time, say 3 to 4 to 5 months, they lived in Kerala and had families here. They never married any of the women. They had women as their concubines largely, and had families with them. And one of the scholars, Francis Day, he says that the word Ma Pilla comes from Ma and Pilla, which is children of mothers, because the father's identity was never that very important, because the fathers never stayed around too long. So if you if you go down this road, you would see structures which are built very similar to the structures in Arabia, where the structures block sandstorms. And that's it's a very interesting aspect to note, because blocking sandstorms, we don't need to block sandstorms in Fort Kochi, right? So the idea of identity is again coming in through architecture. And similarly, the same thing with food. So the coming in of ingredients like dates, using ghee, using a lot of mutton, and of course the biryani is always there, and it's there all over India, but the specific Malabari one has changed because of this influence from the Arabs when they settled here. So we have them we have them in the area of Calicut and all of those areas, and then we have some of them here. But you would see slight differences based on how rich the community has been all these years, how much of their traditions could actually survive, and a lot of it, as depends on economics. And because economics allows these things to happen, some communities flourish while the others really couldn't hold on to those identities. So when I'm speaking about the Mapillas, I remember going to this house in Calicut. It was very late, about odd hour for me to knock at the door. It was around 7:30 in the evening, and they were very kind. They welcomed me. There were only women there, And I was intrigued to find that they still follow the matriarchal system. It was their maternal, the home, and they were talking to me about the new bridegroom, and this was just a few years ago. The new bridegroom who's going to be coming there, and he was known as Pudumapla, and he's always going to be known as Pudumapla, which is the new bridegroom. And it's a 40-day feast that happens, and every day there's a particular kind of food that is made based on what religion calls for them to do. So every food or every ingredient that was used or is used, and whatever is produced, depends on that particular aspect. What happens on that particular day? So so one particular day they would have, say, ghee and rice, and something to go with that, but that would be all that they would get. And the next day would be something else, and everything had a particular reason why these things were chosen. The same with the Jews. So in somewhere around the 16th, 17th century, the Pardesi Jews came from the Mediterranean area, and if you look at their cuisine, and like Kamlanti probably would have tasted some with the Pardesi Jewish families here. If you look at their cuisine, they have used herbs which were never available when they arrived here. There were curry leaves. So instead of something like basil, they would use curry leaves. Yeah, and then instead of using pepper, they would use chili powder, because it was something innovative for them. So these things, when they come together and they marry, then new cuisines come about. They don't mix milk and meat. They follow kosher laws. So what they did was they used coconut milk. So they had these recipes which they brought with them and added coconut milk, and there came an entire new dish. So this is how the evolution of food came about through the years, and one generation after the other. So during my time of research, of course it was easy for me to meet the Pardesi Jewish community, because they were many of them were here at that time. Sarah Auntie was still alive. They were all willing to contribute. But to find the Malabari Jews was a little tougher. There were a handful of people left. So I had to trace them back to Israel, find out where they were, where the Kochini Malabaris live. And then I realized that they have a thriving community there, where they're speaking Malayalam, where they're singing all the Malayalam traditional songs, and they still make all of this food. So then I had interviews with them. Some of them had never been to Cochin before, but they make all this food there. And Ilinit was so excited about this whole thing, because her grandmother was from Cochin, and she's no more. And she shared all of those recipes which her grandmother had carried with her. So it's some of them are in here. I couldn't put all the recipes in here because the publisher was very specific that we don't have more than 110 recipes, because I guess it's again economics. So that was a very interesting thing to note. And then she spoke about the books which were handed down from mother to daughter, across the generations of Jews in Kerala, where there were the songs, the Malayali Jewish folk songs sung by women. So this is oral history, and recipes from their families. So that was a book that was handed down when a daughter got married. When a daughter gets married, along with the dowry, this book is given. There are 11 of these books, or the copies of these books, now at the Israel Museum. The rest have sort of vanished once they all left. So I forgot to mention, for those who may not know, soon after Israel became a free state, 1949, the community, the Malabari and the Pardesi community, started shifting from here back to Israel, which is of course the promised land. So with that, a lot of traditions left, a lot of recipes and a lot of dishes that were made left. So these books, they were never given after that. These books were never something which was gifted at a wedding. So all that is left now is 11 copies, I believe. So some of the recipes from that we managed to get, and they're also in here. Then when we go to Christianity, the coming of the Christians. So Christianity in Kerala, as you know, is as old as Christianity itself, because it came from the area of Babylonia, came here through the spice trade again, and they say it's debated, but it is believed that St. Thomas came here. Whether it is St. Thomas or Thomas of Cana, it's a debatable aspect, and historians keep debating about it. But whatever it is, Christianity came, and with that started also heavy meat eating started at that time. And this was right after the death of Christ is when we assume that Christianity infiltrated into the fabric of society here. So the Christians were a very strong community, very tight community. There weren't all these divisions at that time. It was just Christians. There weren't really churches at that time. It were communities who held prayer services on the roadside. It was only when the priests came in that religion started developing. So if you go to there's a Catholic museum in Ernakulam, very few things on display, but some fantastic stuff. You would see some of the unearthed statues of Christ and Virgin Mary, but in all of them they look like Buddha, simply with long ears, and the Buddha with the earlobes, which are not long ears, earlobes which are hanging, and no resemblance to who they are supposed to look like. Because when Christianity came here, there was remnants of Buddhism here at that time. Buddhism sort of started moving away with the Brahmanical era, starting between the 5th and the 8th century. It started increasing, manifold sort of. So at that time, the artisans here didn't know what they looked like, so they made them to look like Buddha, because that was the only god that they knew, or figure that they knew, which was being carved out. So both Virgin Mary and Christ resemble the Buddha. So this can still be seen there. So soon after, Christianity was a loose religion. There was no religion as such. It was a faith, and it went on. It was when Catholicism arrived with the Portuguese, and they were of course surprised to find that there was still Christianity was already here, and their intention was of course to spread Catholicism and of course the spice trade and money. So when they came here is when they started pressing their laws and their demands on society. They conquered parts of Kerala. Fort Cochin was one of their colonies for a very long time, 1501, when Barbosa and all of them had come back. This was the station that they chose to be in because of the spice trade. So by then Muziris had closed, the harbour had closed because of a flood in 3041, and Kochi was the new harbour. I mean, everybody knows these things. So when the Portuguese came here, we have to remember that they brought in Catholicism. So there are no Syrian Catholics, Latin Catholics, any other Catholics. It was just Catholicism that came. And when they came here, they found that Christianity was there, and they started imposing Catholicism on the community. And this is when the Synod of Aappam happened, and that's an event you can probably read up on if you don't know about it. And that was where really the division between the Syrians and the Latins took place, because there were some of the Syrians who got converted into Catholicism and who adopted the faith under the Pope, under the Roman Catholic, the entire diocese. But then there was a split, and that was where the division came about in Kunan-Kurishi here. So the Synod of Dampier was when Bishop Menzies sort of imposed the whole idea on of Catholicism, Catholicism from Portugal and Rome and these areas on Kerala, and that's where really the division and the split happened. So with that split, of course, some of the Catholics and Christians moved towards the center of Kerala. That's when they all moved from here towards central Travancore side. The Portuguese influenced communities continued to stay here. When the Portuguese either married or had relationships with local women, they came under a wing of what is known today as Anglo-Indians. And not necessarily the Anglo-Indians that you find all over Kerala, but they spoke Portuguese Creole. They made specific kind of food which is very Portuguese influenced. So, and so is the Latin Catholic. The Latin Catholic food is also Portuguese influence, and certain parts of the Syrian Catholic food is also Portuguese influence. But the difference is in the way, again, in the way it is made. Some are mild, some are not mild in flavor. Some use a lot of coconut milk, some don't. So, for example, it's an example I always give when, for the many interviews during COVID that happen online. If you take the meme polichadu, which we all know of, the one that is very popular is the Syrian Christian meme polichadu. But there is also a Latin Catholic meme polichadu, which is not, has not found fame like the other one. There isn't any red chilies used in that. There isn't any there is coconut milk used in that. There's pepper and green chilies. There are no onions, no garlic, no ginger, nothing, and just turmeric. So the flavor is very mild, but the process is the same. You use banana leaf, and you sort of grill it over a tawa or whatever. But the Syrian Christian one is more pungent, it's sour, it's heavy, all of those things, and that's the one which is very famous, right? So these subtle differences, and they go by the same name. And if you go to the Anglo-Indian community, you find that some of the dishes, like the vindaloo, which is very popular in Goa, but we also have a vindaloo in Fort Kochi. The Latins make it slightly different from the Anglo-Indians. Just few ingredients would shift, like somebody would use cloves while the others don't use cloves. So it's like that. That's just subtle differences, but the flavor shifts completely. And this is largely because of the kind of environment these communities come from, or it is from a tradition that has been brought down, passed down generations and never left the families. And these are the interesting tidbits that I found while researching through this, for the book. So if you look at something like the Aappam, which we all know about, and Kerala is so famous for its Aappam in stew and all of that, the Aappam originally came from the Jews and not the Christians as we believe it to be. So it comes from the word oppo, because they made a flattened bread without, of course, yeast, unleavened. But that was the first kind of Aappam that Kerala found getting popular, and from there the whole use of toddy and all of that happened. But if you go back in time, if you go to the Sangam literature, Sangam age, and where the Sangam literature speaks about another kind of an Aappam. So that is a completely different one, which the Tamilians, brought into Kerala, and of course, because of the Chera and the Chola dynasties, there was so much of influence in Kerala as well. But the Aappam we know today is said to have originated from the oppo, which was brought by the Jews from the Middle East. And even the use of vinegar, for example, I'll give you a few, few points here. Like if you look at vinegar. Vinegar was never used in cooking. We used it for pickle in India. But vinegar was used for cooking first by the Portuguese. And that's how we adopted and got adapted to that whole idea of using vinegar in cooking. Your tamarind, the korambuli, all kinds of, all that we use in the fish curry, they all came in from South America through the British. We didn't have it. We were a pepper state. We didn't have red chilies. We didn't have papaya. We didn't have pineapple. We didn't have custard apple. All of these were brought by the Portuguese. So the Portuguese have had a huge impact on the way we eat today as communities which have been influenced by them, right? So we also have the Dutch and the British in Fort Kochi and some other areas of Kerala. But if you look at it, the influence has not been as impactful, largely because the Dutch did not marry local women. And they didn't have the intention of having their religion imprinted on the soil here or anything of the sort. They were very clear, they came here for trade, make money, leave. And one of the few things that continues to exist is the Brother bread, which is popular with the Anglo-Indians. And I think one of the bakeries still make it here. But I remember my grandmother making it. It was a little different from the one made at Quality Bakery. And it was a little hard, I remember that. And that's eaten funnily with mutton kurma and the green Kerala banana. It's a weird combination, but that's how it's eaten. And that's the tradition that carries on even today with the Anglo-Indian community. So the Dutch also had some sort of croquettes, like a potato with meat, and nothing really has been recorded on that. They had a lot of liquor. So they had a lot of breweries around Fort Cochin, which brewing different kinds of liquor. Other than that, nothing much. The British too, unlike Calcutta and Bombay and Mumbai and all of these places, the impact has been much less in Kerala, because by then the Portuguese had a very strong hold, and they left Kerala somewhere in towards the mid 1500s to Goa, when they changed the entire diocese from here to Goa. By then they had taken our traditions to Sri Lanka, Malacca and all of these areas, and that's why you see overlapping of certain things like Idiyappam and Kalappam. You find in all these regions, it's always a debate, did they come first or did we take it there? It's still a debate. Nobody really has been able to pinpoint that, but it's very clear it's through the Portuguese route. An interesting thing talking about vinegar, I still remember this. So in the Cholamangalam side, at Parur, there was a very strong Malabari Jewish community. So they used to use raisins to make wine for their Passover and all of their feasts. And after the wine was made, they had the balanced raisins, which they would use to make vinegar, which is known as chorka. And chorka used to be brought by the Jewish women on canoes. They would ply the waters, come to Fort Kochi and sell them. And I remember my grandmother saying this, because she would get these bottles of chorka and the flavor was very different. Nobody makes this raisin chorka here anymore, but they do in Israel. That's what's amazing. They still make this raisin chorka in Israel. And an amazing thing I found, which is not in the book because I couldn't connect the dots there on how to put that in, but I found out that there is a specific wine in Lisbon even to date called Cochin Wine. They make the wine which was made here there, and it's called Cochin Wine. So one of my friends was telling me how it was made, and and they have no clue where Cochin is. They just know it's Cochin Wine, but when you trace it, you realize it's all come from our Cochin, right? So that's sort of a gist of the whole thing. I can keep on talking, so I'm not going to do that. And but you can ask me questions, because I think that would be really easy for me to kind of specifically go into a specific area, maybe a little deeper, and then explain something if you need that. So there are certain other interesting aspects, like if you take the sweetmeat like muttamala, which is found, we know it's popularly found with the Mapilas, but even the Pardesi Jews have it, but they don't call it that. They make it exactly like that, and the Malabari Jews have it. So it has to have had some connection to Arabia and that whole idea of it coming from there. There wasn't any couscous here in ancient Kochi or Kerala, so they used to get the traders to bring couscous, and Cochin couscous is still very popular in Israel because they make it just the way they made it when we were here. So there are a lot of interesting little details that are there in the book. Some of them was all in my mind because the book had to remain within a certain number of pages. There's always something that is associated with food. So when you're home next time, either with your mother or grandmother or even house help, there will be a story there which I'm sure we can pass on to our children or grandchildren, and if there are they're not around, then somebody else, because it's through food that stories of love and peace tend to be passed down. It's not necessarily through religion or something else, but definitely through food, because it's warming to the soul, and it brings people together, brings communities together.